In the early 1820s, the American Republic was navigating the aftermath of the War of 1812. The era of good feelings under James Monroe projected a unified front, but national consensus was already beginning to erode. Regional tensions and competing economic interests began to replace political unity. As Northern industry, Southern agriculture, and Western expansion pulled in different directions, the old political elite struggled to maintain a coherent national agenda. These divides culminated in the election of 1824. 4 separate candidates split the vote, preventing anyone from securing an absolute majority. Andrew Jackson held the lead in both the popular vote and the Electoral College, but the contest remained unresolved. Under the 12th Amendment, the lack of an electoral majority transfers the decision to the House of Representatives. For the first time, the selection of the president would be decided by a vote among congressmen, rather than the general public. This deadlock created a vacuum in executive leadership. The nation faced a test of its constitutional mechanics, forced to resolve a high-stakes succession crisis within the halls of the Capitol. Inside the House, Speaker Henry Clay used his influence to build a coalition for John Quincy Adams. When the votes were tallied, Adams emerged as the winner, securing the presidency despite Jackson's stronger showing at the polls. Shortly after taking office, Adams appointed Clay as his Secretary of State. Jackson's supporters immediately alleged a corrupt bargain, claiming the two men had traded the presidency for a cabinet position. The scandal shadowed Adams from his first day in office. Public distrust hampered his administration, as Jacksonian newspapers and politicians framed his victory as an act of political theft. Adams held a traditional view of the presidency, believing the office should be guided by intellect and institutional authority. Taking the oath under a cloud of perceived illegitimacy made this old-guard style of leadership difficult to sustain. Adams governed through a sense of duty and intellectual rigor. He proposed a massive national agenda, including a national university and observatories, operating with the expectation that Congress would support his expertise. But the American electorate was expanding. In state after state, property requirements for voting were falling, bringing in a new class of voters who were increasingly skeptical of centralized governance from Washington. Jackson's allies in Congress ensured Adams's agenda went nowhere. His infrastructure and educational reforms were blocked at every turn. This resistance resulted in 4 years of political stagnation. Isolated, Adams watched his initiatives get buried or voted down. The impasse signaled a shift in the executive branch. The presidency was moving away from a model of institutional deference toward a new system that required a mandate from the people, a vacuum that a new political strategy would soon fill. Andrew Jackson and his supporters spent the entirety of Adams's term organizing. They built a national network of local clubs and partisan newspapers designed to turn out the vote for the next election. This movement focused on the perceived elitism of the Adams administration. By framing the corrupt bargain as an attack on the common man, they built a powerful political identity centered on popular grievance. The 1828 election ended in a crushing electoral defeat for Adams. Jackson won by a wide margin, and Adams prepared to leave the White House with his political reputation in tatters. Most observers believed Adams would follow the path of his father into a quiet, scholarly retirement. His single, gridlocked term appeared to be the final chapter of a fading political lineage. The 1828 returns showed that the presidency could no longer be managed strictly through institutional hierarchy. His tenure served as the bridge to an era defined by mass majorities and populace appeal. 2 years after his defeat, Adams returned to Washington. He had been elected to the House of Representatives, choosing to serve as a congressman rather than fading into a quiet presidential retirement. Stepping away from the presidency allowed him to abandon the compromises of national party leadership. In the House, he was free to focus entirely on the constitutional principles he believed were under threat. He soon became the leading voice against the gag rule. This House resolution was designed to suppress the growing national debate over the abolition of slavery. The rule meant that any anti-slavery petition sent to Congress was automatically tabled. By refusing to even read these documents, the House had effectively silenced the citizens' right to petition their government. Adams fought the rule for nearly a decade, arguing that it violated the core tenets of free speech. This relentless campaign transformed his public image, replacing the label of a failed president with that of a constitutional champion. This crusade reached its moral peak in 1839 with the Amistad case. A group of Mende Africans had revolted on a Spanish slave ship and were being held in a Connecticut jail while the government debated their fate. When the case moved to the Supreme Court, the now 73-year-old Adams agreed to represent the captives. He was the only statesman with the legal stature and constitutional depth to challenge the federal government's position. Adams centered his defense on the Declaration of Independence. He argued that the captives were not property, but human beings with an inherent right to self-defense and liberty that no treaty could override. The court ruled in favor of the Mende Africans, granting them their freedom. This victory provided a moral clarity that had been missing from his politically compromised ascent to the presidency in 1824. These legislative and legal battles in his later years eventually became the primary focus of his historical legacy, far outshining the 4 years he spent in the executive office. Adams's tenure as president remains a study in political gridlock, yet his subsequent resilience in the House demonstrated that a representative's impact on the nation's moral and constitutional course can be steered as much from Congress as the executive mansion.